Evening and welcome to the City of Bowie Workforce Development and Life Skills Training Program for Spring 2021. We will be presenting tonight on life skills, managing stress, as well as decision-making and risk. But presentation will be by Rhonda Simon of Bowie Youth and Family Services and Simone Colquitt, also Bowie Youth and Family Services. Following that, we'll have a short 5-minute break, and then at 7 p.m. we will reconvene to talk about computer science with Michael Green of Best Bet Media. As always, all of the program information is available on the program website, cityofbowie.org/worktraining, including the PowerPoints that we're using this evening, and eventually a recording of this same presentation. And again, if you have any questions or comments, we ask that you please raise your hand or type it in the Q&A, and we will respond. And this is the agenda for the evening, just so everyone's sure. And with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda and Simone to begin. Thank you everyone for being punctual and joining us this evening.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. Good to see you guys, or good to be here with you again this week. As Kay said, so this week we are going to be talking about stress management and decision making and risk. Kind of ties in with last week. Money management and money and time management, because last week when we were talking about money and time management, we talked about prioritizing what our values are and what we want to see in life. And the week before that, we were talking about setting goals. So I think this it definitely all ties together when we set a goal and we know where we're going and we know how to get there and we know our priorities and our values, then we can make decisions, informative decisions. Sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. Okay. So managing stress, examining resiliency, and exploring challenges and opportunities associated with transitions. We're going to talk about some stress management techniques, and then we're going to talk about decision-making and risk, and examine attitudes and beliefs about risk, and explore the possible consequences involved when taking risks. And one of the things we were talking about in our planning session this week is that all risks are not bad risks. So, you can take a good risk. When we start to invest our money, they asked us, are we aggressive or safe, right? On our risk taking, they ask our risk, what is our risk taking skills? And thank God my husband's aggressive and I'm safe. So we balance each other out. So not all risk is bad risk. And that's what I meant to say. So before we start, I'd like to hear from you guys, and you can use the chat box or unmute yourself and talk to us, because I want to hear from you. I don't want to be the only talking head here tonight. I want you guys to answer these questions. What causes stress and how do you manage stress? So the floor is open. Please let me know what causes you the most stress, and do you have some stress management techniques you could share with us? Okay. Okay. Anything in the chat box? So,
no chat comments yet.
No? Okay.
Yeah, I think, Rhonda, probably, especially during these dual pandemic times, the COVID pandemic and the pandemic related to race relations in our country, people probably have a lot of stressors that they're facing, even more than we usually have faced.
We have someone sharing their stress management techniques. Anthony takes deep, long breaths. Lindsay says that everything stresses me out, and she does breathing in and out as well. I agree. Okay. Everything is also stressing me out right now.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. For me, the headlines and they cause me stress, right? And just even like Simone said, the dual pandemics that we're dealing with, it seems like that's all every news channel and every news outlet and every talking show wants to talk about. And I can't handle it all the time. So yeah, sometimes that information that we take in is too much and it causes us stress. So for me, I manage that particular piece of stress by turning it off. And I will talk to my friends and coworkers about what's going on, but we don't do deep dives unless you're in a safe place. But that's how I manage that, is to just turn off the headlines and take some deep breaths. I like to remember who I am, where I'm at in life, the work that I do, and what's important to me. So that helps me manage that kind of stress.
And the other thing that's a little unique about stress nowadays is that we're all facing similar stressors, all around the world. And that hasn't always been the case.
Yes, that's true. And I feel some solace in that, right? I do take some solace in knowing that we're in this together. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I thought that was kind of cheesy. Everybody was saying it like within the first week. And I thought that was cheesy. And I thought it was kind of like they were capitalizing on my pain and my stress. But a year and a half later, or 15 months later, actually find solace in the fact that we are in this together. And so you understand me. I feel understood. So yeah, that's how what do you guys tell me what you think about being in this together through the past 12 months? It must be challenging to be a young adult. Usually as a young adult, you can find an older mentor, to help you navigate. But we've all navigating this together. We've never navigated it before. So we're all learning it together. So I'm interested in hearing how you as young adults have handled the stress of the past 15 months. Because you're not in high school, maybe you're not in college, maybe you're, job seeking has to be stressful. We've had a couple people
We have a chat comment, sorry.
Okay.
Stevena says, I like to watch something funny like a movie to decompress. It's really nice to have a group of people to talk to because we are all going through similar situations.
Yes, thank you. I love that. Anyone else?
Yeah, humor is a great one.
We also have Sophia says, sometimes I go walking outside to manage stress.
Exercise and fresh air.
I do the exact same thing. I walk with my dog almost an hour a day now. I did not walk that long, but now I need it.
Yeah, those are all very good. And I love to laugh. So I will do the same thing. I will definitely go to my Netflix and find something funny to watch. So I appreciate the feedback, guys. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's talk about resiliency. It is the ability to respond to a challenge and adapt to changing circumstances. So if you didn't think you were resilient before 2020, you are now. I tell all young people that because they're never sure about what their resiliency is. But it is the ability to respond and to bounce back and to find ways to deal with the changes that are happening in your life and the challenges. So when you're a resilient person, okay, we find ways to benefit from this opportunity without acting in ways that are harmful. I did say at the beginning of this pandemic, COVID pandemic, that necessity is the mother of all invention. And I figured some creative people were going to come out of this thing very creatively because they had to, right? They had to find new ways to make money. And that's being resilient, being aware of your personal strengths. When I think I can't handle something, I do go backwards and I'm like, oh, I handled that at that time in my life. So I can do this. I find that to be very helpful. In your student guide on page 14, and I forgot to say, of course, we have the electronic URL to the student guide. If you don't have it in front of you, I am going to read the resiliency inventory, and you're kind of going to gauge yourself, right? So in my questions, they all have these answers, 3, 2, 1. So 3 is something I do almost always. So it's a muscle that helps me to get from place to place, and I carry it with me wherever I go. So number 2 would be something I do sometimes. So I look at that like a muscle that needs to be strengthened before it can serve me well. And number 1 is things I do rarely. So I look at that as a muscle that I've never had to use. And in order to use it, I must practice it and strengthen it. So I'm going to ask you a set of questions, and then you're going to answer them 1, 2, 3. Okay. Actually, it's a statement. So I can handle stressful times which have a lot of uncertainty. So for you, how would you answer that for yourself? 1, 2, or 3. When we're done with this, you guys can share or not share, but I said this in the last 2 sessions, everything is about your aha moment, right? What resonates within me that I'm going to take away from this? So this is about you learning you. It's the best way to succeed in life is when you know yourself, you can navigate your world a whole lot better. So that's what this inventory is all about. Okay, so if you don't have your book, you can just kind of write the answers down as we go. The right answer is what's right for you, right? No, there's no grading. This is not a test. Okay, I possess skills to help me relax and handle stress. And you're going to answer that 3, 2, 1. And if I'm talking too fast and you need me to read it again,
Them to type
please
it in
let
the
me
chat
know.
or just answer it to themselves, Rhonda.
Just answer it to yourself right now. Let's talk about it when we're all done. I have about 10 of these to get through. So just write down your answer. And then if you want to share it when we're done, we'll talk about it. I have a supportive network of people with whom I interact regularly. So is that a 3, 2, or a 1? And a supportive network of people is family, friends, school, if you have teachers or counselors or maybe coworkers, if you have a job, that's a network of people around me that I can go to with whom I interact regularly. Okay, I keep a positive attitude even in difficult situations. 3, 2, or 1. I stick to routines and take good care of myself. And self-care is not selfish. I always say that. We need to take good care of ourselves. I rely on myself and have confidence in myself. I communicate how I feel in a variety of ways, like talking or listening to music or making music. I keep my eye on the big picture, even in challenging situations. So sometimes when I'm having a really bad day at work, my big picture is the paycheck and retirement, because remember I shared that's my goal. So when I keep my eye on the big picture, even in challenging times, I know what my priorities are and my actions help me achieve them. That would be the goals that we talked about in our first session. And the last one is I help others, which helps keep my problems in perspective. 3, 2, 1. So these behaviors are behaviors that are often found in people and found in resilient people. No one has them all. No one is a 3. I know I'm not a 3 to all of these. There's 2s and 1s in here. My 1 is I keep a positive attitude even in difficult situations. I'm definitely a 1 on that. I do bounce back and I do catch my bad attitude. But it's not always there. So that's my share. Simone, did you want to share something?
Gosh,
And
I think
anyone
these are-
else?
yeah, I think these are all pretty good. I think about, I love the one about helping others. That's always been a good one for me, that finding ways to help other people, somehow that just helps to redirect my energy, my thoughts, my ideas. I don't know that I do it as much as I would want to do it.
Mhm.
Well, I'm in a profession where I do it, but still, there's something about helping people when you feel like that helps to be resilient.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
I
Oh
think,
no, go ahead.
yeah, I think another one that kind of helps people back, and that's not kind of on here, and it's that kind of helping people or getting involved in your community in ways. I think there are many ways young people do that,
Mhm.
where they're being involved and active in the world around them,
Mhm.
and that's really shows, the research says it really gives a lot of boost to the
Mhm.
self-esteem and of individuals.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, that
Yeah.
social activism
Mhm.
and advocacy is really a good way to go.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
So how about the participants? You guys want to share a 3 or a 1? If not, that's okay. At least this is about you knowing where you're at and where you might need to make improvements. But if you'd like to share, definitely we'll take the time to listen.
So the whole idea is helping to deal with stress. How can we become more resilient
Mhm.
and deal with stress even better? Because these are very, very stressful times for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Nope. Okay. Let me see. All right. Yeah, sometimes when I talk about what's bothering me with other people, it's like taking the monster out from underneath the bed or in the closet or hiding in the shadows. And it takes that power away and sometimes reduces my stress when I can name that stress or at least talk to someone else about that stressor.
Mhm.
So understanding triggers. Simone, do you want to take this one, please?
Yeah. So what's a trigger? What are some of the things that kind of um, induce stress in our lives or make things a little bit more difficult? Basically, a trigger is a situation. It could be a person, a place, or a thing that causes you to feel distress, like you're just not it. It's uncomfortable. Triggers are stressors that can cause reactions that can be both physical and emotional. Physical signs of stress in us can be something like a racing heartbeat, your palms sweating, your mouth is dry, or it can be emotional, like depression, anxiety, moodiness, difficulty sleeping. Um, so, what triggers cause you stress? That's our question to you guys. Does anybody have any triggers that cause them stress? What effect do you think stress
We
might?
have a raised hand, sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
All right, please unmute yourself. You can go ahead. You're still muted. Sorry, Savina.
Does-
Oh, there
Thank
we
you,
go.
Sabina.
Um, I don't think it's a particular stress or I'm sorry, a trigger, but I know one thing that I really struggle with sometimes is keeping a positive attitude.
Mhm.
And so most of the time I'm okay, but sometimes I find myself beating myself up. And what helps me through that is to remember that I'm taking this one step at a time and I've come so far from where I was.
Thank
So
you.
just reinforcing that I have made many steps in this journey And although I'm not where I want to be right now, I've still made the effort to at least come as far as I have. And that's what helps me go back to or have that positive attitude again.
Wow, thank you so much. So you might get a thought that I'm not measuring up, I'm not meeting my goals. And so those kind of thoughts might trigger stress for you, or
Yes.
something might, yeah. And so then you're able to talk back to that in such a powerful way. Say, hey, I've come a long way. Look at how far I've come.
We also have a comment in the chat.
Excellent.
Stephanie
Yeah.
says, I work with children during the day, so child mistreatment is an emotional trigger for me. Me too, Steph. It makes me feel very upset and uncomfortable.
Right. So, yeah. So when we're able to name the stressors, then we can begin to do something about them. Right. For example, does it help to handle the challenges and opportunities, or does it slow you down? So whether the stress is big or small, being able to name it helps us to then do something different, to change and go one way or the other. So,
Oh, sorry.
how do we
Yes.
handle stress? Thank you. That's fine.
Mhm. So how we handle stress can help us hinder or reach our goals. Some harmful ways of managing stress is it might be through alcohol, drugs, or cigarettes. And I know that some people use alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes to manage stress, that they really think that it's helping them, right? Because in the moment, I feel good. I can get a little more relaxed and maybe, I feel better. But in the long run, we do know that each one of those things is definitely harmful to our physical well-being as well as our mental well-being. And like I said before, consuming alcohol and drugs might cause us to do things that we might not otherwise do. So that's another reason why these are not really good ways to manage stress. I say that to a group of people who I know are watching the world deal with stress through alcohol and drugs. And, but it's not really all that it's, they glamorize it to be. It can be a very difficult problem to have. I always mention at this point, like when we started in the pandemic and the essential businesses that stayed open in it while everything else was closing. And one of them was the liquor stores. And liquor stores stayed open because if you're an alcoholic, like you will need that alcohol. It's just, it's a physical reaction to your physically needing that thing. And people who work with alcoholics and deal with the disease of alcoholism understand that it is a very serious condition that, that needs to be handled very delicately. So therefore it was an essential business and had to stay open, which I found an interesting look at our society as a whole. And if you are struggling with drugs or alcohol, you do not have to struggle alone. So at the end of our slides, we do have a slide with all the 800 numbers but we're also here for you. It's what we do. So you can always call our office as well or email us and reach out to us if you really need help. And it doesn't have to be your use of alcohol, but it could be the use of somebody else using alcohol that is causing you stress and distress. And that's a real thing as well. So don't struggle alone is my point. We really are here for you. It's what Simone does for a living. So we are here for you. So some helpful things that are positive things that will help is exercise, music, talking with friends, prayer, or meditation. So before we move on, I would like to know if there's anything, some helpful ways that you guys have found to help you deal with stress. somebody said, you guys already said like walking outside.
Um,
I
Hey.
sing.
Rhonda, if I may,
Yeah.
one of the things that I had to do with this when the pandemic started, as you were mentioning that the news being so stressful and everything, I just had to make a conscious decision to not watch or read stories or fiction that were hard, like sad endings, murder,
Yes.
cop shit,
Yeah.
all of that. I just had to excise that from my life because it was too stressful for me to think about the abstract concept or the reality on the ground. And that,
Mhm.
so sometimes stress management isn't just what you do, but it's also what you choose not to be doing, as you were mentioning with drugs and alcohol.
Absolutely. Thank you,
And
Kay.
Sorry, we
Yeah.
also had Lindsay commenting in the chat, playing with my
Mhm.
cat.
I had to turn off the medical shows, like no hospital shows, please. Yeah.
Right. Oh, Lindsay plays with her cat. Pets are good ones, like Kay and her dog. My dog, yeah, he's a puppy. Well, he was a puppy. Well, he still is, but lots of energy, but lots of fun energy. So yeah, our pets can be very helpful.
Yeah. Somebody else mentioned walking a dog. Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah, they're excellent.
yeah. I like to sing. I cannot sing well, but I sing anyway because I love music and singing and dancing, even though I cannot sing or dance. But it helps me. I turn it up and I turn it up loud, and yeah, that's one of my best techniques.
Yeah, sometimes taking an extra long shower
Mm,
or, can be a simple thing to do, making sure you eat well,
mhm.
get enough sleep.
Take a
That's-
bath.
Mhm.
Water is very soothing. Yeah, thank you. So we're just going to take a look at 2 helpful techniques, and some people mentioned this. Oh, shoot. Hold up. Okay. A couple of people mentioned that they do deep breathing. I do mindfulness. I teach mindfulness in schools, and so I stay in tune with mindfulness teaching. And it is one of the things that I have found to be very helpful. And mindfulness is more than just taking a deep breath. So it's about staying with that breathing for, a few minutes. I'm up to 45. I'm very proud of that because when I started with 5 minutes and 5 minutes was hard. So just sitting and paying attention to your breath, and then your mind wanders and you come back to your breath, and your mind wanders again and you come back to your breath, and it's just a practice over and over. But it can be very, very helpful. So when you take a deep breath, I'm just going to ask you to take them a little more mindfully, right? So let's all just kind of sit upright in our chairs, but not tight. But you want, I want the breath to be able to be unencumbered by my slouching of my diaphragm, right? And then in through the nose, out through the mouth. You can hold it. So you can go into a count of 4 and hold to a count of 4 and then blow it out to a count of 6 or 7. And you do that just for, maybe 4 or 5 times, and then increase as you can. This is a very good way to relax the physical reaction of a trigger. So one of my triggers is, it's not a bad trigger, it's a challenging trigger, but a trigger is speaking in front of people. My mouth gets dry, my hands start to twitch, and my breathing becomes shallow. So when I sit just a few minutes before I have to do something like this, and I'll take a couple of them deep breaths, and it really helps to just physically calm the body down so that the mind and the body can be on the same page. Because when we're triggered and stressed, our body is reacting and our brain and our body are not. The brain's just not keeping up with the body. That's that fight flight nature that we have. So I want to fly, and my brain's like, no, stay here, but the body's gone. So the deep breathing helps me put those 2 things back in connection.
Yeah.
I look at mindfulness and meditation. Headspace. time out, and then I go to YouTube. So just, you can go everywhere and find apps or YouTube channel for some really good teachers on meditation and mindfulness breathing to help you, just to strengthen your practice. I look at this stuff as self-care. This is what I do for self-care. And self-care is not at all selfish. It's the very old analogy when you're on the airplane and they say, if your oxygen mask falls down, to put it on your child before you put it on yourself before you put it on your child, because taking care of me helps me take care of the child. So when you take care of yourself, you're actually taking care of those around you as well, because you're being your best self. And Simone, you want to add anything to these?
Yeah, I think that with the mindfulness, I kind of think of it as paying attention on purpose without judging. And you can just taking a pause. I mean, if our world would simply take a pause, if people around the world would do that more often, we would be a much more functional world, I think. And so taking a pause just to pay attention on purpose without judging just about anything. You can pay attention to the light in the room, the sound in the room, your breath that you're taking, the smells in a room. But just taking a pause and shifting to pay attention is part of how you start this mindfulness practice. And like Rhonda said, it can really expand and grow and be a wonderful resource that you don't have to pay for. You can use it anytime. And the benefits for you, your biology, it's great. It's wonderful, wonderful benefits mentally, benefits relationally. It's just a wonderful tool. I wish I'd known about it when I was younger.
Yes, me too. So anyone else, have you ever tried some of these? Please tell me about them. If you have a good YouTube or meditation that you like, I definitely would like to hear about that. And I'm just going to pause here to give you guys a moment to share with me in the chat. My aha moments come out of this by what you share with me. So I definitely want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah,
take a moment.
Yeah, any kind of ideas they have about self-care, that what's in their self-care toolbox.
Yes.
This is one that we're suggesting, but it's good to have a toolbox of things that you can rely on when it comes to taking care of yourself. This is how you manage stressors. Anybody? What's in your toolbox? What are you doing? What are you guys doing for stress management?
Well,
We have a
if you
comment in the
guys,
chat. Lindsay says, giving myself a break. And Stavina says, I really like to put on a face mask and take an hour to listen to a sermon or meditate or pray.
oh,
Wonderful.
and do you
you
love
guys.
that?
I
Yeah,
do
thank
something
you.
similar. I try to have a bath time just myself with bath bombs, candles, face mask,
Yes.
deep conditioner. I only get them like once a month or less, but I do try.
Well, and that's great, Kay, because like I said in our money management that I put my salon in my budget because that's what I do once every 6 or 8 weeks. I get to go to my hairdresser, and it's just the most de-stressing thing I can think to do. So even if you do it once a month, I still think that it builds, so it strengthens us and helps us make it through another day.
A simple one I do too is just lotions for your hands, especially now where you're putting using so much hand sanitizer. Just taking something with a nice, refreshing scent and rubbing it on your hands can be so soothing and a nice way to give a little self massage, and it's relaxing. So it doesn't have to be anything, huge. It could be little small micro things that we do that add to our overall health and well-being.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Simone. So if you guys don't have anything, I'm just gonna move along because we're gonna get to our next lesson. So some techniques: get together with friends, give yourself a break. Sticking to a routine can be very satisfying when stress is swirling. I'm very routine oriented, and I have found that it is very helpful. Control, focus on what you can do, right? I cannot control anybody but myself and my reaction. That's all I have. So when we focus on that, that's helpful. Simone mentioned this, helping someone else, getting involved in your community. It just really helps to, like she said, refocus. I'm not so inward, focusing on my problems, but I can help someone else with theirs. And that is a good one. And then we said that too, turn off the media, turn off social media, turn off your phone, take a break.
And I can't mention enough, get enough rest. Don't get too much rest.
Right.
And you don't want to stay in the bed, but you want to make sure that routine of going to sleep and getting out, getting that rest makes a huge difference.
Yes. Thank you. All right, guys, any questions, comments? Because we are going to move along to decision making and what's at stake. Okay. I gotta refresh my memory. What's on page 20? Okay. All right. So risk. We are exposing something we value to possible loss or harm. And despite its negative connotations, risk can also imply beneficial consequences. If one of the things they say in here is apply for a promotion on your job, or even applying for a job, right, is a risk, because I'm always taking that risk of being turned down. But if you don't, apply for a job, you'll never know what you missed. But those are good risks, and they're risks worth taking. And we learn something, right? If I failed at getting that job, I want to find out why. Like, was it my resume? Was it my interview? Did I not have enough experience in that field? What was it? So take a risk, use your journal, write it down, and find out, like, what happened. Did you fail? Did you succeed? Right? Because
and sometimes when you're looking for a job, just going for that interview is part of the reward. You might have to go for 50 interviews before you get the yes you want.
Yes, that is very true.
So
okay, so let's look at a decision-making method that they talk about in our student guide is a thing called PROPS, and we're going to look at that step by step. So it's the acronym PROPS: pause, reflect, options, prioritize, and select. And you can do this. You don't have to get paralyzed making a decision. We recently, I got my kitchen renovated. Oh my God, there's so many options out there just for sinks. I will paralyze myself. So you don't, when I use this though, and I can reflect on what are my priorities in that kitchen, that helps me make a decision. So decisions can be daunting and a bit paralyzing, I think. So, we pause, take a deep breath. You're going to figure this out. Before you go into that interview, take a deep breath, right? It's a positive attitude aids in decision making, which is true. We can reflect, like, what is this situation? What decision needs to be made? What is at stake here? What can I lose? What can I gain by making this decision? What are my options on these decisions? I think you always have options. Always. There's always a or a B. They might both look like they're bad options, but maybe your one is just a little better than the other. But there are always options. So just look at the consequences.
Mhm.
What's the benefit and what's the loss? And then prioritize. So last week we talked about values and priorities. So when I said this earlier, when you know what your priorities and your values are, it's easier to make decisions. So prioritize what's at stake and what am I willing to do here? Okay. And then select. So choose the most effective option for you that reduces, prevents, or your exposure to harm and or gets us to the next phase in life. So go ahead, Simone, talk about pause and decision-making. You have some good insights.
Oh, gosh. I think we were going to go to the student guide, right? And look at
Yeah.
things too.
So right here is on page 22 and page 23 in the student guide.
Yeah. So I think what we'd like you to do, so this activity invites you to apply this method to get some, to a realistic sort of scenario. It's a step-by-step decision-making method, and it's useful when considering the potential benefits and harms and consequences associated with taking a risk. Prompts can be helpful for both simple and complex decisions, short-term and long-term decisions. Using prompts enables you to think out your options and prioritize them based on what you value. The more you practice and master these decision-making skills, the more equipped you'll be to make decisions that are right for you. So let's think about, in this, we're gonna, should we come up with some?
Oh, you mean a situation or an example where we have to make a decision?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this very simple.
We talked about one in the
Yeah.
in our when we were preparing. So one thing I like to add about decision making that I think we kind of leave out when we talk about this is that sometimes we find we've made a decision, and especially with young people, they've made a decision and then they somewhere along the line realize it's not a good decision. And so my question to you guys is this: you listening? When you realize you've made a bad decision, a not so good decision, is a oh my God kind of decision, well, then what? Then what do you do next?
So we're looking for you guys' feedback. So I made a decision, but then I realized it's not such a good decision. I'm heading somewhere I don't want to go. This is going to end badly. And then what do I do? Give me some ideas. What would you do?
I'll give you the solution.
Okay.
Let your next decision be a better one. Let your next decision be a better one. The scenario we kind of we talked about in our planning was, say you're riding with some friends and good friends, you've been hanging out a long time, you know each other pretty well, but you go into a 7-Eleven and you notice that some of your friends are stuffing their pockets and they're heading out without paying for stuff. What's your next decision? Anybody? What would be your next better decision? Do you get in a car?
We have Lindsay says, tell them it would be a good idea to pay for it or put it back.
Yeah, you can try to prompt them to do the right thing. That's good. Thank you, Lindsay. Anybody else? What about you? What you're kind of stuck there. Do you get in the car with them? What do you do? What would you say, Rhonda? What would you do?
I'll tell you what I told my children. So, because this kind of applied to the same, you're at a party and you drank too much. Do you drive home? Do you Uber home if you have the money, or do you call someone to come pick you up, a family member, a friend? And I always tell my kids, please call me. I would rather come pick you up and we'll deal with your drinking, or even if you're in that same situation, if you're in a 7-Eleven with friends who are doing something you know is not going to end well, call me. I would rather come pick you up. And I would say that you also have someone in your life, family or friend, who would rather pick you up out of the store or from the party than the morgue or the police station.
We do
and
have a
we can-
comment in the
we-
chat saying the same thing, Rhonda, to find another way home.
Good.
Another way.
Yes, I like
Excellent.
that. Yeah.
Thank
And I
you.
want to say, Rhonda, my father made the same offer to me when I started in high school, and it meant the world to me to know that I had that safety net to fall back on. In a way, it made me feel bolder about saying no to situations I'm uncomfortable with, because I didn't feel
Yeah.
locked into them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because so often, Kay, it feels like, once you've made a bad decision, it's like, oh my God, I've already
Right.
gone down this road. Why bother?
Right. I got to follow through.
Yeah, and you keep
Yeah.
going down the road. So I just want to encourage you guys,
Yeah.
decision making is complex for all your life. I won't tell you how old I am, and I'm still having to make decisions and don't always make the best ones, but you try to make your next decision a better one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's always a U-turn, right? So make that U-turn and make a better decision. I love that. I just want to see, I want to make sure so we talked about the effect substance use has on our decision making, and that we're here for you. So I'm not going to beat that up too much. I
think the other thing, Rhonda, when we were talking about making the decision, we were talking about sort of doing a pros and cons list.
Oh, yes. Say
Yeah.
that, Simone. Yeah.
Yeah, where you're kind of listing out your pros and cons of your decisions. And as you go through the props model, which is really excellent, you pause, you reflect, and then you put your options. And on one side, you have your pros that are beneficial. And on the other side, you have your cons, the things that aren't so beneficial about a decision. And you could come up with a list, right? And that's an excellent way to kind of think about potential, big decisions, risk that you might have. But then I encourage you to go one more step, and you have your pros and cons, right? And so you can look at your pros and ask the question, are there any cons to my pros? So you're making a decision about taking a new job that is in another city. And one of the pros might be I get to move away from my parents, right? So you ask yourself, that's a pro, but then you ask yourself, is it a con to that pro? I get to move away from them, but I might miss their support because we'll be 300 miles away, right? And the same thing with the cons. You have your cons and you ask, well, is there a pro to the con?
I've also heard people call that opportunity cost. Like, this is a great opportunity, but every opportunity has cost. You're always giving up something.
Yeah, it helps
You
you
might not even have realized you were giving up before.
Yeah, it helps you kind of look a little bit deeper, going a little deeper in the pool, and evaluate some of the options that you might have. Yeah.
Thank you, Simone. That's my aha moment, because I just put pros and cons on in my list, and that was that. And so that's a great way to reevaluate my pros and cons of making a decision. And you also said, props is you're going to make decisions all of your life. You're going to have stressors. All that life is just full of stressors and making decisions. That's never going to stop. And sometimes they happen quicker, and I don't have time. And then sometimes I have a long time to think about my decisions. Props can be used, in a moment, or it can be used, over, let's say you are in college and you're trying to decide what you're getting out. So props can be used over the time you're in college, or it can be used in a moment. Oh, my friends are drinking too much, smoking too much. I don't want to be there. I don't want to do that. That's instant, right? You're instantly going through props. You're prioritizing, you're looking at your options, and then you're going to select your best decision based on your values.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful skill to just continue to practice and get support if you need it. And if you find you have particular, difficulty in any areas, that's what we do as family counselors, and Rhonda and the work she does as well.
Yep. So we are here for you guys, and I wanted to give you time to look at this slide. Just some other. You're all so fortunate. Pros and cons to the internet. You're very fortunate that you have these resources at the click of your phone, which I love as well. So, and then the other side of the internet, the dark side, which I know nothing about. I'm just saying that in recording. I know nothing about the dark side. And we are here for you, right? Bowie Youth and Family Services. We are right down the road from wherever you are. And you can call us 10 to 5, Monday through Friday. And if we don't have the answer, we will go find the answer for you. That's what we do. Because we don't know everything. We don't know every situation you might be facing. So we'll go help you find the answers. It's what we do. All right. Okay. Any questions, comments that you guys would like to say at this time? Because we got about 2 minutes and I am done sharing. And then you guys get to take a break. Thank you for being here, for listening, for participating.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys.
All right. Again, if you guys have any comments, Davina says thank you to you guys.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, Rhonda and Simone. And thank you.
We'll see you guys next
who
week.
Participated.
Right.
We will see you guys
Bye-bye.
next week.
Bye-bye.
All right. We will now have a break until 7 p.m. When we will reconvene with Mr. Michael Green of Best Bet Media to present on computer science. So for now, you guys can step away from your devices and we will see you guys all at 7 p.m. sharp. I will give a 1-minute warning and then we will get started. So Mr. Green, can you unmute yourself just so we can make sure the audio works?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, I can hear you. Great.
Great. Well, we got a backup this time in case something does not go as planned.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I actually got an email the next day from Spectrum, our internet service provider, and they were like, well, we're doing some upgrades and whatnot, and we're warning us of some downtime after the fact. So,
of course.
So after the fact doesn't help.
I did broadcast this session to everyone who attended on Tuesday, so hopefully some of them will be able to log on and catch this presentation live, and then we'll send the recording to them as well.
Okay, and if you need me to create any other additional video to go with that, let me know and I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, I think we should be good, but I will be in touch if we need to do anything else.
Okay.
All right, so now we're going to take our break and we will reconvene at 7. I will give a 1-minute warning. Thank you everyone again for attending our first session on life skills. Okay, everybody, this is the 1 minute warning. 1 minute, we will reconvene to present on computer science with Michael Green in 1 minute at 7 p.m. Thank you again, everyone who is attending. Hi, Mr. Green, are you ready to present?
I am.
Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share and turn it over to you. You can start.
All right. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so thank you for joining this presentation on computer science. I am Michael Green, as Kay mentioned. What we're going to do in this class is kind of go over some background of computer science, talk about a little bit how they're used on the internet and the web, and do some hands-on programming. So I'll help you get introduced to HTML and PHP. So what is computer science? Basically, it's the study of the architecture, hardware, and software as it relates to computers, and which began about 70 years ago with the development of the semiconductor transistor. So what's so important about the transistor? Well, the transistor can function in two roles. It can function as an amplifier, like you would have in a hearing aid, and it can function as a switch. And functioning as a switch is where computers come in, because computers can understand an on and an off state. So that basically corresponds to what we call binary in computer language, and which also translates very well to hexadecimal, which is another part of programming. So combinations of these transistors allows us to create different circuits and different combinations to allow us to get different results based on those inputs, whether they're a positive, or a high, or a low, or a 1 or 0. So this picture here is just kind of the progression of from the first generation of a transistor, which looks like a vacuum tube, which is what it is. And some of your grandparents may remember TVs that had a bunch of these tubes in them. And when the TV broke, TV repairman came out and he just started swapping tubes until he found which one was broken. And so then we progressed into the smaller type transistors, and then eventually up to like the 6502 processor that you see right here, which had about 3,500 transistors. And this was where things were when I first started in computers. So today, like you see, the Intel Core i7 has 2.6 billion transistors in it, which is quite an increase from the early days. So a little interesting note here, something called Moore's law, which is more of an observation, but they come to call it a law because it holds so true and steady. And basically what it says is that the number of transistors in any type of dense configuration doubles every 2 years. And what we mean by that is a dense configuration is like the Intel processor, where you have billions of transistors. And this has held true for about 45 years. And if you look at the chart here, you can see the progression from 1970 all the way up to about current day, which are up to 50 billion transistors in a single dense configuration or a single processor. Now, if you consider that scientists say that we have about 100 billion neurons in our brains, and a transistor is basically the equivalent of a neuron. So we're pretty much at that 100 billion neurons, because this chart actually goes a little bit higher than it shows right here. So that kind of gives you something to think about as to what the possibilities might be and where computers are going to go in the next few years. So let's talk a little bit about computer hardware. What makes up a computer? A computer is made up of the microprocessor, of course, that executes the instructions, input-output devices, which, the keyboard that we use on our computer every day, the display screen, your hard drive that holds your programs and your data, and of course, things like printers. And it also contains memory, which is what you would commonly refer to as RAM in a computer. And that memory is where programs reside when they're processing. So when the computer loads a program or an application, it loads it into memory, and that's where it runs. And then data is saved off to the hard drive. All right, so let's talk about a little about computer software. So software is what tells the computer what to do. And without it, a processor is nothing but a pile of transistors that have anything to do. So it's not going to do anything that it's not told to do, unless we create thinking algorithms and stuff like that where they do it themselves. So the most basic software a modern computer needs is an operating system. Now, these operating systems started in the early days as CPM, which probably none of you have heard of, but it was called Control Program for Microprocessors, and it's what ran programs like Lotus 1-2-3 and early versions of Microsoft Word. And then we had MS-DOS, which is the old Microsoft disk operating system, and Unix. Those were basically the three that existed out there in the world. And over time, those have come to expand and improve. DOS became Windows. Unix branched out into multiple different flavors of Unix, including free Linux operating systems that are widely used today. CPM kind of went by the by, and it's not really out there anymore. So this is a diagram that shows how everything communicates. We have memory, CPU, and devices at the bottom, and the operating system, which would be your Microsoft Windows 10, communicates back and forth with these devices. And then your applications, such as Microsoft Word, Excel, or Grand Theft Auto, whatever it happens to be, communicates with the operating system. And I'm moving kind of quick through this, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
No questions so far in the chat.
Okay, all righty. So what roles do computers play on the web? We have internet communications, and we have things like domain name servers. Those are the servers that kind of know where everybody's address is. They know how to tell you to get from one place to another. We have routers, bridges, and hubs, and some of that stuff sits right in your own home. You have a Wi-Fi router. Some of you may even have a bridge or a hub if you have some fancy stuff set up. They're also prevalent, in data centers. We have web servers, which is where all the stuff on the internet resides, somewhere on a web server. And then, of course, your web browsers, which are your home or office computer. Even network attached storage devices have small Intel, sometimes Intel Celeron processors in them with memory and disk storage. And you may have one of those in your home as well. And we also have database servers, file and print servers, and many other things. So they have a lot of roles that they play on the internet and on the web. So this is a diagram of the internet and how things communicate. On the left-hand side, we have a picture of a data center that has a bunch of servers in there, and each one of those servers has what we call an IP address. And these are places like Google. Google has data centers all over the place, and which have many different computers that have different functions. And we'll get into that in just a minute with Amazon. And then up on the internet, we have domain name servers that are also sitting in data centers somewhere. And again, domain name servers are the the traffic cops, so to speak, that are going to route all the traffic where it needs to go. And then you have your home computers, which are assigned an IP address as well, usually by your ISP. You may have several computers in your home, but they all share the same IP address in most cases. So web servers, what's a web server? It's typically a fast server with a lot of memory, a lot of storage, depending on how it's being used. Typically runs a Linux or a Windows operating system. The most common is Linux. Linux is fast, it's free, and there's a lot of programs and a lot of history behind it that run very well on it. Windows has been around, obviously, for a while too, and it can function as a web server as well. It has active server pages and things like that, and its own Windows Server operating systems. So they also run a web server application such as Apache or Nginx, and they also serve up static and dynamic web pages. So let's go back a little bit and talk about static and dynamic web pages. A static web page is just something that has a set amount of data. Maybe it's just an article or something like that, but the data doesn't change. The data is unchanging and it's referred to as a static web page. A dynamic web page is a web page that can interact with the person that's viewing or on the web page. So we're going to get into this in some hands-on in a few minutes. And but a dynamic web page can read data from a database. So it could be your bank's software on the internet where it goes to a database, retrieves your bank balance, shows you your transactions and all that type of stuff. And you can click different options and the output is dynamic. So that's what we mean by static and dynamic web pages. So let's talk about the different types of web hosting that are out there. If any of you are familiar with web hosting, you've probably heard of HostGator, GoDaddy, places like that. And they offer different kinds of plans, and most people have a shared hosting plan. Those are the ones that are advertised as very, very cheap, and they sit on a server and you share a server with a bunch of other people. So your programs may run fast or slow depending on the other people that are on that server and how many resources they're using on the server. So if somebody else is using up a lot of resources, you're not going to have very many for your applications. And then we have virtual private hosting. What these are, they're virtual private servers. And we say virtual because we have a server with a set amount of resources, but we kind of carve it up like a pie and give everybody a certain amount. So we're shared hosting, you're kind of sharing the resources with everybody, and a program or a person can use as many resources as the system will give them. With a virtual private server, you have a dedicated amount of resources. So if you buy, let's say, 2 CPU cores and 4 gigs of memory, you always have that amount of resources available to you, and nobody else can affect that. And then the other type of hosting we have is what we call dedicated hosting, where you're actually given a server that's sitting in a data center somewhere, and you have the entire server to yourself. So however that server is configured, whether it's 8 cores, 8 gigs of memory, 16 or 32 gigs of memory, all of those resources are yours to use. So obviously, as you go up from a shared to a VPS to a dedicated host, they get more expensive. But depending on your application, you may consider having a VPS type server or even a dedicated. Okay, so it used to be that if you wanted a web server, you had to either build it yourself in your home or have it built in a data center or something like that. Today, we have huge companies like Amazon and Google that have data centers literally all over the world, and tons of servers in those data centers. And this has a lot of advantages because today you can actually go out and create a server literally in minutes. And I'm going to change my screen here and we're going to go look at that. Let's see. I want to go to that one. Oh, the same one. So Amazon has a nice platform called AWS, and they offer web hosting, virtual private servers, all types of stuff. You can get your domains, you can get private IP addresses, just about anything you want. They have elastic block storage, just basically anything you need. So what we're going to do here is just kind of give an example of how quickly you can create a server. Now with Amazon, you can sign up for Amazon AWS free. It's no charge to sign up. And within your first year, they actually give you free server instances. So what we're going to do is create a base server, which is a Linux server.
Could you repeat that? Your audio garbled just a minute.
Let me back up. Okay. So we're going to launch a new instance, and what Amazon has here are basically different operating systems. So you can have a server that has a Mac OS, Red Hat Enterprise Linux OS, Ubuntu, which is a free operating system, Windows Server, that you see at the bottom. You can actually load and install any of these images, and it's very, very quick. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go down to the bottom here and pick Ubuntu Server 1604, and the LTS simply means it's a server version, and it's designed to be installed on a solid-state drive system or volume. So I'm going to select that, and notice you see a little thing here that says free tier eligible. So if you're a first-time Amazon user or AWS user, you can actually create an instance that's on this T2 micro, and they'll let you have it free for a year. And here you see the number of CPUs, you see the amount of memory. Obviously, I can choose different types of VPS configurations, different numbers of CPUs with different amounts of memory. And the instant storage just means that it uses their elastic block storage only. So that also gives you network performance. So we're going to choose the free tier eligible one as an example.
Oh, we have a
We're going to configure it.
Sorry. Mr. Green, Joshua is
I
asking.
didn't hear you.
Joshua asks, what does each flavor of Linux provide for the user?
Each flavor of Linux, well, it depends. Obviously, the newer versions are newer versions, and they have more compatibility, more features. Some of them come with database, like MySQL database is already installed. So it depends on the flavor that you want, and obviously Windows Server would require a license, where Linux is free and doesn't require that you purchase a license. So they have different applications installed and different capabilities.
Thanks for
Anything
the
else?
question, Joshua. Nope, no other questions at this time. Unless anyone has one, please feel free to interrupt. Nope.
Okay, again, we're moving kind of quick, so feel free to ask questions. So this is the configuration screen. I'm not going to go over what each one of these options does. We're just going to take the default, which is one instance. The shutdown behavior just tells you, whether you want to just simply stop the instance or terminate it, in which terminate in this case means completely delete it. So, and then we have other options, enable hibernation and things like that. CloudWatch is a monitoring system that can be enabled as well. So we're just going to take those defaults, and the next we're going to give it storage. So we can actually size the amount of storage anywhere we want, and we can also increase or decrease the amount of storage once the instance is created. So if I find out I need more disk space, I can come back and reconfigure the instance with more storage. And then the volume type, the default is just general purpose SSD, which is your solid state drives, which is fast. And then you have different levels of provisioning on these as well. Okay, IOPS refers to how fast these are, the baseline. Oops. It tells you right there 3 IOPS per gigabit with a minimum of 100, burstable to 3,000. So that means if suddenly you need a bunch of speed, it can give it to you. All right, and then just delete on termination. This means delete the instance if you terminate it. All right, tags are just identifying comments. Basically, if you have a bunch of different servers running on Amazon, you may want to group them and give them a tag, and it gives you that ability to do that. So now we're going to review and launch it. All right, and it's showing us what we selected, and we're going to launch. Okay, now one thing that Amazon requires for security, which gives you the ability to access your server, is what they call a key pair. It has a public key and a private key. So I'm going to choose an existing key pair that I already had created. And it's just saying, you know, yes, you have access to the private key file, because obviously if you don't, you can't access your instance. Should be bad. And relaunch. And that's basically how fast it is. If you know how to configure an instance, you can literally get these things up and running. There we go. So it's in a state of pending at the moment. It's putting it together. It's saving the operating system to the disk space and doing everything it needs to do. And in just a second, this thing will pop up as running. There you go. It's running. So that's how fast it took to create a virtual private server. And to access that server, the only thing I need to do is get its IP address. This is the IP address that is assigned. Remember, we talked about IP addresses as being sort of your address on the internet. So what we can do now that it's running is use a terminal such as PuTTY, which is a very common one. Then I'm going to choose test right here, load it. I'm going to paste my IP address in there. Now, if you need an unchanging IP address, you can assign a what they call an elastic IP and assign your instance an elastic IP address. That's what Amazon calls them, and give your server a permanent IP address or a permanent home, so to speak. All right, so we're gonna make sure we're using the correct private key, which we are. That's the one I already created.
Is an elastic IP the same as dynamic IP?
Is there just an IP address that's assigned to your instance? They call it elastic because it's flexible. It can be used for a lot of different things. So as you see right now, we're actually on the server. So right here is where you would start installing, you know, if you're using cPanel, you could install cPanel. cPanel is a very common web server interface. Or if you want to use virtual min or webmin. You could install that, and then of course install Apache or Nginx, whatever you intend to run on your server. So there's the contents of the server. So that's how quick it is. It's very easy, very cheap, as you can do this. If you're a new user on Amazon AWS, you can basically set yourself up a free server and start playing around. And if you mess something up on the server, just delete it and create a new one. It's a great way to learn. It's a great way to get familiar with setting up servers, loading web OSs and stuff like that. So let's go back to the presentation here. Is there any questions about that? Nope.
No questions in the chat.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about website programming. That's probably what a lot of you came here to see, is how do I program a website? How do I create my own website and make it do stuff? So web browsers render HTML, and that's hypertext markup language. It tells it to display a headline or a paragraph. Cascading style sheets, which is CSS, allows you to style your text to look different ways, colors, things like that. And then we also have JavaScript, which runs on the on what we call the front end, or your computer. JavaScript executes on the client's computer on your own system, and you've probably seen JavaScript update on your computer from time to time. And then multimedia, which is pictures and video and all that good stuff. And here's just a functional diagram of how things communicate. On the server over here, of course, we're running Apache or Nginx or something like that for a web server. And then we have programs like PHP, Python, HTML pages, and all of those things combine together to apply HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that your computer executes over here, and the web browser displays on your screen. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about server-side and client-side programming. We talked about JavaScript being client-side, and there's also server-side, which is very important because the server side is where everything happens. So whether you're creating an application to interface with a bank, bank accounts, bank balances and stuff like that, or what have you, you do this on the server side, and you do it with languages such as PHP, or if you're a Windows server, ASPX, Python, C#, and there's many, many more. All right, so what we're going to do now is hop over to W3 Schools, and for now you can just sort of watch my screen, and then I'll let you go to W3 Schools on your machine and start doing some coding. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about HTML first, because we need to have a little HTML knowledge when we start coding PHP. And what we have here is just the basic HTML. So the doc type HTML is just simply telling the system this is an HTML document. HTML is always the first tag in the document. And then the head stands for the header. This is where you put the page title. And there's a lot of other things that can go in there, like CSS styles, page descriptions, all kinds of other things that I'm not going to get into here. Then every tag always ends with the end tag that has a slash in front of it. So for your head section, you have a slash head. For the body, you have a slash body. And those are the beginning and the end of each section. So an H1 tag is a heading. one being the largest. Depending on the style sheet that you might be using, it could be a different font, it could be a different size than the standard H1 heading. And we could have H2, H3, H4, H5, and so on. And as those numbers increase, the size of the heading gets smaller. So I'm just going to show you here in the little try it yourself window. These windows, just so you know, when you get on your own computer doing this, they open up as a separate page. And when you're done, you just close them. So you try it yourself, separate page, close it to get out of it. And again, so what we have here is the title. It says page title. This is a heading. And then we have a little, the P stands for paragraph, basically, or a line of text. And says this is a paragraph. So we have a page title, we have a heading, and we have a little paragraph text. Now, if you want this to say something different, oops, I can type. This is my heading. And then we can click the run button, and you see that it changes it over here. Then you can do the same thing with the text, and then you could even add more if you wanted to. So that's how the basic HTML works. And let's see. So again, this just kind of goes over what we just talked about, the H1 for a heading, P is paragraph, a BR is basically a carriage return. It goes to a new line. So what I want you to do now on your computer, if you've created an account at W3 Schools, go ahead and go to w3schools.com and log into that account. If you have not created an account for some reason, just go ahead and go there and don't worry about creating an account. You can still do everything that we're doing. It just won't, save your progress or anything like that. So we don't have to spend time creating accounts if we don't need to. So w3schools.com. And if you could put in the chat window when you're there and let us know, then we'll go on to the next step.
Lindsay said she's there. Anybody else ready? We'll pause just a little bit longer to let you guys get all set up.
We're running ahead of schedule, so we got a little time.
Mm-hmm. And if anyone has any questions about the presentation or comp sci in general, this is your time to ask. We have a professional in front of you.
Please ask.
No other questions so far. All right, looks like we don't have any other questions at this time.
Okay, is everybody into W3 Schools?
We have another person confirming they are ready. I think we can go forward.
Okay, so in W3 Schools, what I want you to do is across the top, you're going to see HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, all that. What I want you to do is click on PHP. That's what we're going to be playing with here. Now, PHP is a server-side scripting language. And the reason I chose PHP is because PHP is compatible with just about every type of system out there, every type of operating system, you name it, it's going to support PHP. So, and PHP also gives us the ability to embed our PHP code within our HTML code.
And what does PHP stand for again?
PHP stands for Hypertext Preprocessor. Probably like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense. What's the other P for? I don't know. That's just what they call it. Okay, so talking a little bit about PHP and how it's styled. Now, like I said, you can embed PHP code right within your HTML document. The only thing you have to do is on the end of the file name, you just put .php instead of .htm or .html. And that way the system knows that you're executing a PHP file, and the PHP server in the background will be able to handle it and process it. And that's where the hypertext preprocessor language comes from. Okay, so in the example here, we see that we have just a basic HTML document with a body, and that's it. And then in the middle of that, we've embedded some PHP code. So PHP always starts with this code right here at the top. It's got the # sign question mark PHP, and then its closing tag is a question mark greater than sign. So that's the beginning, that's the end, and then in the middle is where you put your PHP script. So if we click on try it yourself with the example at the top, you'll see that the only thing here is PHP, which is echoing my first script. Now, echo just stands for print, basically echo to the display your type. Now, if you want to change that wording to something else, just type in something else, whatever you want to type in, and then click on run. It'll process it, and you'll notice on the screen on the right, you'll see that it's changed and shown us my bad typing. So close that window, and we'll go back to the main W3 Schools page. We'll continue on here. So going down to PHP intro on the left-hand side, this gives us a little introduction to PHP. Again, it tells you what it stands for, hypertext preprocessor. And again, it's one of the most widely used open source scripting languages out there. It's free, I'll point that out. PHP is free. You don't have to have a license for it. And it is kept up to date very frequently. So again, what is a PHP file? PHP file just simply ends in the extension .php, which designates that it's got some PHP code inside. What can PHP do? You can do all the cool things we like to do, which is generate dynamic page content. So if we want to, go in the background, grab stuff out of a database, display it on the screen, we could do that. So we can write any HTML code we want to, output that code to the screen in a dynamic fashion. We can collect data from forms. We can set cookies. I know you probably hear about cookies all the time, or you have to click the little box at the bottom of the screen and say, yeah, you accept the cookies. Well, cookies are just temporary storage files on your computer. We can have data in databases and control user access. We can encrypt data, which is security. When we encrypt data, we're securing it. Okay. So again, PHP runs on just about everything, and it's compatible with just about everything out there today. And it supports a wide range of different types of databases. It's free, and it runs very efficiently. So let's go. We'll stop for a second on PHP install. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but the PHP installation is basically just telling you that you have to install PHP on a web server. Now, if you chose to set up a web server on your own Windows PC, that is possible to do, and you can install PHP on your own PC, as well as a version of a MySQL database to go with it. And you can create your own code and run it on your own computer away from the internet and do it privately. Of course, on servers, you have to install it. When we're creating a server like we did on Amazon, we actually have what we call stacks of software, which include PHP, MySQL, some other applications that all install at one time on your server. Any questions there?
Does anyone have any questions?
All right.
Nothing in the chat so far.
Okay, so a little bit about PHP syntax. So basic syntax, again, it always starts with the two question marks, the entry point and the exit point, with the question marks and the question mark PHP, and your PHP code goes in the middle. Again, we've already kind of looked at this, so we're going to move on to comments. Now, when we write PHP code, we want to comment the code that we write, so that not only we'll be able to remember what we did, but other people can look at it and say, oh, okay, well, this is where he's doing this, this is where he's doing that. So you put comments in there, that say, retrieving this data from the database, or writing this information back to the database, things like that. So you know what different sections of your code are doing. If you do the try it yourself, again, everything that follows the two slashes here is a comment, and the hashtag also serves the same purpose. So none of this stuff is going to print on the right-hand side because they're simply comments. Now, if I inserted, let's say, echo, and then a quotation mark, and say, my text, and then put a semicolon at the end of it, and then you run that, then on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see it display my text or whatever you happen to type in. And then, of course, the comments do not display at all. They're simply in the code. All right. You can close that screen. And we're going to move down to PHP variables. So the main types of variables, we have different types of variables in PHP. We're not going to go over them all here because that would take a long time. But the basic types of variables are text variables that hold text, like you see hello world in the example. And then you have variables that hold values like integers. So the examples here show $x, your variable always begins with a $sign in PHP. And you can see that $x and $y are set to integer values and not text values. And you also note that the integer values are not encompassed by quotation marks. Text is always encompassed by quotation marks, whether it's a double quote or a single quote. Okay, and we'll go down to the next line, which is variable scope on the left-hand side. And the variable scope just simply means that if you have a function, and what a function is it's a piece of code that does a specific thing. That in this case, it says my test, and it's going to do a test on a variable. So you don't have to write that code in there every time you want to do that test. You just reference the function my test, and you can execute that code wherever you need to. So functions are a great way to reduce your coding so you don't have to rewrite code over and over again, and they make themselves available to different files in some cases as well. So variable scope simply means that if a variable sits outside of a function, we call it global, and that variable is available globally, but not inside the function. If we put the variable inside the function, then it's considered local, and that variable is only available to the function itself. So just kind of a little good to know type thing. And let's move down to PHP echo and print. And as we saw a minute ago, let's do try it yourself on this one. And echo simply echoes to the screen whatever text that you enter in there. Now that text could come from a database. It could come freely from anywhere. In this case, it's just typed in as static text. So if you were to change any of that text in there and hit run, you'll see it change on the right-hand side of your screen, the right-hand side being your desktop. Okay, close that window. And we're going to pop down to PHP forms about midway down the left-hand side to form handling. And we're going to give you an idea of what some PHP code can do inside of a form. So what you see in the example here is a simple form. It has a form action that's referencing a file called welcome.php. Now, if you look right below that, you'll see the contents of welcome.php. It's a separate file in this case that's sitting on this W3 Schools server. But what this file does is it evaluates the input that it's given. Okay, so when we put a form action equal welcome PHP, it's going to send the name and the email over to this form, and then the form will be able to pick it up. I'm sorry, the file welcome PHP will be able to pick it up as a post variable. So up here where it says name input type text, name equals name, and then the one below it says email and name equals email. Down below in the welcome PHP, it's picking up those values where it says post email. And it's saying, go give me the value of email and give me the value of name that was passed to me from the form up here that referenced it. So if we hit try it yourself, you'll see that the two text boxes show up, the name and the email, and you can actually enter values in there for the name and the email and hit submit. And then what the welcome file does is it tells you what you entered. And that's what the welcome file did that we just looked at. So backing up one step, what the submit does is when you click the submit button, it sends the data, name and email over to the file welcome.php, and then welcome.php can pick it up and process it and execute it, do whatever it needs to do with it. All right, any questions? All right, so close that window and let's go down to the next item, which is form validation. Now this is a little bit more involved example. So we have more fields here. We have name, email, website, comment, and then some gender radio boxes. So if we look down below, it's going to give us the required values for the fields for name, email, website, comment, and gender. And these are just requirements that someone would write when they're actually creating the code. If we move down below, we'll see the text fields, the name, email, website, and comment. And then below that, we'll see the radio buttons. Now, the way radio buttons work is they're a type of radio. And for each line that you put in, input type equal radio, it's going to create a radio button. And as long as the name is the same for all of those radio buttons, they'll be grouped together. So in this case, they're all called gender, and the values are male, female, and other. Now, for this file, it's not referencing an external file like we did with welcome.php. It's referencing something called server PHP self. And what that simply means is that when we post, we're posting right back to the same file, the same form, okay? So it's the form is gonna process the data. It's not gonna go to another file to process it. And one thing to note here is this HTML special characters. What that command does in PHP is it changes your characters like slash to their actual values that are like percent, whatever. And then if we scroll down here, we'll be able to see that under form security. And the reason we do that is because people can inject script and basically hack into a system or cause other types of havoc. So if we had it with just the PHP self without the HTML server, they would be able to insert text and hack into the system, which would be a bad thing. So we put HTML special characters in there. And if you look under the section that says how to avoid server PHP self exploits, you'll see that the output comes out as $GT, $LT, script, whatever. And if they try to inject anything into that, it's not going to work. So that's what special characters means. It just takes the characters and turns them into their decimal values, so to speak. Okay, and scroll on down to the example where you can try it yourself. And let's click on try it yourself. All right, and then I'll explain a little bit about what's going on here so you can follow along. Now, obviously, on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got all of our text boxes that we just looked at. And then on the left-hand side, of course, all of our code. Now, remember that we can embed PHP code within our HTML. So what you see in the document right under body is the PHP code that sets the default values and retrieves the default values. So under defined variables, it's just setting everything to null. The quote just basically stands for null, nothing. And below that, it says if server request method equals post, which means if you've clicked the submit button, then it's going to go get these values and it's going to set each one of these values, $name, $email, to the post value. And it uses the test input function right below it to trim away spaces, strip away slashes, and use the HTML special characters on the data as well. So you see each one says test input and then $post, gender, commit, website, email. It's grabbing all the values from these text boxes on the right and it's processing them. Okay, so it's setting all those values over there. Now you'll see that that PHP code ends, and then we get into the HTML and the form. So again, we have the form, we have the HTML special characters as a security measure, and then we have our text boxes for name, email, and we have a text area for the comment, which just allows us to type a lot of text versus just one line of text. Then, of course, the gender radio boxes. All right, and then on the bottom down there, we have another piece of PHP code that simply says, echo to the screen the values of name, email, website, comment, and gender. So if you go to the right-hand side, and I'm just going to type a bunch of garbage in mine, but type whatever you like in each one of those fields, and then choose a gender and click submit, and you'll see that it processed the data, and that PHP down at the bottom down there echoed that data right back on the screen. So the echoing piece is just an example of where you would process that data in your PHP script. Okay, you can play with that for a minute if you like. And when you're done, close that screen. And we're going to move down one to the PHP form required. And this just takes it another step further, and it's going to evaluate the data put into those boxes a little bit more. So if we scroll down to the box right below the required fields where the PHP starts, what they've done here is in the define variables, they've added some more variables up there to hold the error codes or whatever they want to put for errors if there's no value in the fields that are required to have a value. And then below that, again, it says if server request method equals post, which means you've clicked that submit button and it's posted back. And then it checks post name. And it says if post name is empty, then I want to set the name error to name as required. Otherwise, it does what it did in the last one, and it does a test input on the value that was sent over in the post, and it assigns that value to $name. And then it repeats that procedure for email because email is a required field. And then below that, you'll see that if the post website is empty, it just sets website to null. And then otherwise it tests the input and saves that value in the website variable. Same thing for comment. And then same thing for gender. Oh, except on gender, gender is required, sorry. So if gender is empty, it's gonna put an error there. This is gender is required. So let's scroll down a little bit more and we'll see the HTML that goes with that. And we're gonna click on try it yourself. And again, we see the same form here, except this time on the left-hand side of the screen, we have this extra code we just went over. So on the left-hand side, you'll see at the top, once again, it's going to evaluate the post and it's going to check that the required fields have a value in there. And if they don't, then it's going to generate not going to generate, but it's going to set an error in a certain variable called email error, name error, and gender error. And if we scroll down and look at the HTML under where it says PHP form validation example, you'll see that we have an extra added piece of text here called span class, class equals error. Well, error class actually got defined way up at the top under style. It added a color, which is red. So it just calls that style right here that it called error. And then again, we've inserted some PHP text here because we can insert it anywhere we want to in the file. And we're echoing the error. So if error has a value, it's going to show up right next to the name box, the email box, and the gender box. And then once again at the bottom, it's going to echo back everything that you typed in. So if you type something in these fields again, and let's say you leave out the email address and click submit, you'll see the email is required in red. And where that came from was up in the, when it checked the post variables and it came across email, email was empty. So that variable email ERR for error set the value email is required. And it used the red style, and then it was echoed right next to the email box. So that's where that came from. Any questions? Okay, and you can close that screen now. I may have lost you in this, and that's okay, because you can come back to W3 Schools and you can go through these things step by step and learn a little bit more. So if we go on down to validate email and URL, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but it just takes these things one more step, and it executes some additional commands like preg match, which simply looks at the data and looks for certain content. So if we want to tell if it's a valid email address, let's say, you can look for certain characters. Same thing in a URL. Okay. So let's hop back over to my
I do want to do
screen.
a time note. We are almost coming up on 8 o'clock. So
Okay. All right, let's come back and view my screen. I'm going to go back to the presentation just to hit a couple things real quick. Oops. So let's talk about real quick what kind of jobs are available in computer science. I have a list there. You have everything from software engineers, hardware engineers, all the way down to network architects. So the point being is there's a lot of different types of jobs in the computer science world. And if you're interested in being, say, a game developer, there's a place for you. And there's actually many, many courses now in video game design in most colleges and universities. So depending on what you're interested in, if you're interested in the hardware part or maybe security, there's jobs out there that pay very, very well for people that know what they're doing in these particular fields. Now, where to go from here? If you're interested in pursuing a career in computer science, keep learning. Go use W3 Schools. W3 Schools is a very good place to start to learn, do some hands-on stuff. You can start with the very beginning with HTML and just go on down the list and learn. It has quizzes. to quiz your learning and, see how well you're doing. But use it and polish your skills and ready yourself for a career in computer science. From there, you can go to a university and get into some computer science and programming classes and do that. So there are a lot of different scholarships available out there. If you're looking at my screen, you'll see about a dozen of them right there, but there are many, many more. If you go to scholarships.com, you can see dozens more out there, but there are all types of different scholarships that are available that you can use to get into web design or any kind of computer science course at a university or even a junior college. And that's it. I thank you for watching and listening to me. And if you have any questions at all, Kay has my email address. You can forward them over to me. And if you'd like to, ask more questions or find out some more information, I'd be happy to answer those for you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Green. And as always, as Mr. Green said, any questions you have, please refer them to me and I will make sure that he gets them. We will be concluding next week with our 4th week. We will cover healthcare careers, as well as effective communication skills and building relationships in life skills. Again, anyone who has any questions or wants to follow up with Mr. Green, just email me and I will connect you guys. Thank you guys so much for bearing with us for a long presentation. I know it was a bit complex, but also the recording will be available on the website, so you guys can look this up afterwards. If there's anything that you didn't quite catch, you can watch it again. Thank you all so much for coming, and that concludes this evening if no one has any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat. We had several participants say thank you for the presentation. I'm now going to conclude this evening. We will see you guys next Thursday at 6 p.m. for our final session. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Green.